"I already got fined for supporting Cheryl," which I think is crazy. Those were the words of Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White just days before her team was robbed in Game 5 of the WNBA semifinals. For weeks, everyone has been focused on the phantom calls, the crooked stats, and the suspicious outcome of that game. But the real story, the story the league tried to bury before it even happened, doesn't start with a bad call. It starts with a fine designed to silence the truth. You've been told that Stephanie White was fined for breaking a rule. Today, we're going to connect the dots and show you how that fine was actually the first shot in a war between the league's coaches and a front office desperate to hide its own corruption. This wasn't a punishment, it was a gag order. And today, we're going to break it. We are a community of narrative analysts here, and our job is to filter out the noise and find the real story. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive investigation, do me a favor and hit that like button to show us we are on the right track. It's a huge signal for us to keep digging. Okay? Let's set the stage. Everyone who follows the WNBA knows the basics of the Game 5 scandal. The Indiana Fever, a team that had battled through an injury-plagued season without their superstar, Caitlin Clark, were on the verge of a historic upset against the defending champion Las Vegas Aces. But in the final minutes, a series of unbelievably one-sided calls changed everything. Aliyah Boston, the Fever's defensive anchor, was forced to the bench after fouling out on one of the softest calls in playoff history. The free throw numbers were a joke, with the Aces living at the line while the Fever were getting physically mauled with no whistles. It got so bad that guard Kelsey Mitchell had to be hospitalized after the game with a rare muscle condition brought on by the sheer physical trauma her body endured without any protection from the officials. The game looked rigged, the fans called it rigged, and the league remained suspiciously silent, hoping the story would just go away. But here's what they didn't want you to connect. The real story, the one that exposes the league's intent, started days earlier. On September 29th, the WNBA announced it was fining Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White $1,000. On that very same day, they also announced a $1,000 fine for Las Vegas Aces coach Becky Hammon. The official reason: both coaches had made public comments supporting Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve, who had been suspended after her own explosive criticism of the playoff officiating just days before. On the surface, it seems straightforward. The league has rules against coaches publicly criticizing referees, and they broke them. That's the simple, clean, corporate-approved story. But as narrative analysts, we know the official story is rarely the real story. We have to ask the questions that nobody else is asking. And the most important question is this: why on earth would two fierce rivals, two of the best coaches in the game, on the absolute eve of the most important series of their seasons, decide to risk league punishment and distraction to defend a third coach whose team had already been eliminated? The logic of a rivalry makes zero sense here. Why would Stephanie White and Becky Hammon care about Cheryl Reeve at that moment? The answer is they didn't. This was never about Cheryl Reeve. This was about them. This wasn't two rivals taking pot shots. This was two generals on opposite sides of the battlefield, recognizing that the entire war was being compromised by a corrupt system. Okay, many of you watching have probably been connecting these same dots on Reddit and Twitter, and you are onto something huge. White and Hammon weren't defending Cheryl Reeve. They were defending themselves. They were forming a secret, unspoken alliance. Think about the timeline. Reeve gets suspended after her team is eliminated in a game plagued by questionable calls. She goes public, blasting the league's officiating. Instead of seeing a rival go down in flames, White and Hammon saw a preview of what was coming for them. They knew the officiating was a crisis. They knew it was inconsistent, and they knew it could single-handedly decide a playoff series. Their public comments and subsequent fines were a coordinated warning shot fired directly at the commissioner's office. And Becky Hammon's quote on the matter tells you everything you need to know about their mindset. When asked about Reeve's comments, Hammon didn't hesitate. She said, "From what I heard, she did not tell a lie. She said the truth." That is not the sound of a coach worried about a media policy. That is the sound of a rebellion. It's a coach backed into a corner using the only platform she has to signal to the entire world that the system is broken. Stephanie White echoed the sentiment. They were, in effect, telling the league, "We see what's happening. We know what you're allowing to happen, and we will not be silent." And how did the league respond to this plea for integrity? Did they review the officiating? Did they meet with the coaches to address their concerns? No. They responded with force. They slapped both coaches with fines. They didn't just enforce a rule, they sent a clear, unambiguous message: shut up. We are in control, and you will not question our authority. The fines were a power play, a desperate attempt by a league office that was losing control of its own narrative to intimidate two of its most powerful voices into submission. It was a gag order, plain and simple. What do you think those fines were really about? Was it a standard procedure for breaking a rule, or was it a deliberate threat from the league to silence its critics? Let me know your theory in the comments. The league thought that a couple of $1,000 fines would be enough to put the issue to bed. They thought they could silence the coaches and sweep the entire officiating crisis under the rug, just in time for their marquee playoff matchup. But they were wrong. They didn't silence a rebellion. They just fueled it. And they had no idea that the very disaster their coaches were trying to warn them about was about to unfold on national television for the entire world to see. So the stage was set. The league had drawn its line in the sand, and the coaches had been effectively told to sit down and be quiet. And what happened next was not just a controversy, it was a prophecy fulfilled. The very chaos the coaches' secret alliance was formed to prevent unfolded exactly as they feared. Game 5 became the ultimate exhibit of the WNBA's officiating crisis. It was a masterclass in game manipulation, whether by incompetence or by design. The whistles only blew one way. Aliyah Boston, the Fever's all-star center who had been dominating with 16 rebounds, was systematically removed from the game. She was whistled for one phantom foul after another, culminating in a sixth and final foul with just 27 seconds left in regulation, a call so bad the Fever wasted their final challenge trying to overturn it, to no avail. The numbers tell a story of their own. The Fever were hit with 25 fouls. A'ja Wilson, the Aces star, shot 10 free throws by herself. Aliyah Boston, who battled in the paint all night, shot only 2. This is the part of the story you already know. But it's the next dot we have to connect that transforms this from a story about a stolen game to a story about a league that is actively endangering its own players. Let's talk about Kelsey Mitchell. The original story was that she left the game with severe cramps and was hospitalized. That's the sanitized version. The medical reality is far more disturbing. Mitchell was diagnosed with rhabdomyolysis. For those who don't know, this is a rare and serious condition where damaged muscle tissue releases its proteins and electrolytes into the blood, which can damage the heart and kidneys and cause permanent disability. According to Mitchell's own statement, her muscles ceased to deliver adequate blood, causing her body to seize up physically from the strain. Let's be perfectly clear, this was not just cramping. This was a severe medical emergency caused by excessive, unrelenting physical strain. It's what happens when a player is battered, bruised, drowned, and beaten, possession after possession, with no protection from the officials who are supposed to be ensuring their safety. Does a player having to be hospitalized with a serious muscle breakdown condition cross the line from a badly officiated game to outright player endangerment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This is the human cost of the WNBA's corruption. This is what happens when the league chooses to silence coaches instead of listening to them. Stephanie White and Becky Hammon weren't just fighting for fair calls. They were fighting for the safety of their players. And Kelsey Mitchell's hospital report is the proof. The league's failure to maintain control didn't just cost the Fever a game, it almost cost a player her health. When you connect all the dots, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. The secret alliance between Stephanie White and Becky Hammon, the league's aggressive fines, and the medical emergency in Game 5 are not separate stories. They are a sequence of events exposing a system in complete collapse. This is bigger than one bad game. This is a league whose commissioner is facing mounting pressure and potential resignation, a league that refuses to implement basic transparency tools like the NBA's last 2-minute reports, and a league that believes it can intimidate its own coaches into silence. When Lexi Hull said after the game that her team was built for adversity, and when Coach White talked about fighting through everything thrown at them, they weren't just using sports cliches. They were speaking in code. They were telling the world that they had survived a battle not just against the Aces, but against a corrupt league office that tried to gag them, failed to protect them, and then tried to rob them in plain sight. The final verdict is this: the 1,000 fines were never the footnote to this scandal. They were the prologue. They are the undeniable proof that the league knew it had a crisis on its hands and chose to punish the truth-tellers instead of fixing the problem. Stephanie White didn't just break her silence with a quote. She and Becky Hammon exposed the entire conspiracy before the first whistle of Game 5 was ever blown. So what's your take on all this? Who do you think is most to blame for the Game 5 scandal, the referees on the court, or the league office that tried to silence the coaches who saw it coming? Drop your verdict in the comments below. And if you believe in holding the league accountable and want the real story every single time, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is far from over, and you won't want to miss our next update. Finally, if you know another fan who only saw the bad calls but missed the real conspiracy, share this video and help us expose the truth.